Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 3rd of August 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. But with me in the studio at the technical desk is Mike Robinson. Now, we're delighted to say we're going to be joined in just a few minutes by Sam Hill from the People's Tribunal, and that's a tribunal that's aiming to sweep away the cover-up surrounding child abuse. Obviously a very, very hot topic at the moment, made even more so by the second allegation against Mr. Ken Clarke. Before we go there, let's just have a few words on the weather. Don't really want to say too much. Wonderful weekend here in Plymouth, lots of blue sky and sunshine. And then what did we get last night? Gales and torrential rain. So the reports I'm prepared to accept this morning are this afternoon rather, from Manchester. Showers, I think, and Glasgow cloudy. We'll leave it there. Well, excuse me, Mike is just going to lead off with an article about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It seems that there's a little bit of trouble in that camp. What have you got, Mike?
Yeah, it's good news because they failed to make a deal. So 12 trade ministers from various countries in Hawaii last week to negotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and they didn't succeed. According to the Australian Trade Minister, Andrew Robb, he said the sad thing is it's 98% concluded. So that 2% throwing a spanner in the works, and that's got to be good news. Of course, the problem is that it's going to be another year before they get to sort of get back into this again, which is going to bring them right into the window for the US presidential election. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, President Obama is not going to achieve this as one of his legacy items, which is what he was hoping for. So that's a bit of good news. We'll keep an eye on that, though, as it goes forward.
So Obama not doing too well on taking guns away from the American public, and on this one, Mike, is he beginning to suffer, do you think? All right, we'll leave it there. Okay, well, let's move on to the People's Tribunal, and we should have Sam Hill with us. This is a shot from the website, UK Child Sex Abuse, People's Tribunal, sweeping away the secrecy. Have we got you there, Sam?
Yes, hello, Brian. Yes, it's the final week now for taking submissions for the People's Tribunal. They're taking submissions about covered up abuse involving people in Parliament and the destruction of evidence and cover up of people in the police by people in the police force. I've been through the process myself as well as working for the team, and I can say that it's independent, extremely well handled, and we will be providing a final report for the Home Secretary on the state of the cover-ups in this country in the near future. But it is the final week for submissions. It's all anonymised, so you don't have to worry about giving away your identity, and it's handled very professionally.
Right. Sam, can you tell us how did you get this going? Obviously a lot of work went into it, and a lot of people saying, presumably, we don't have any confidence in the main public system, so we're going to do it ourselves. How did the People's Tribunal get going?
I went to a meeting where we were voting on who to bring in on the steering committee. It was originally organised by Joanne Welsh, and she spoke to John Cooper QC and various people who'd worked on the Iran Tribunal as a way of finding justice, but without the same legal prosecuting abilities of a legal tribunal, but one that people could put their testimony forward and would have a real impact once it's been collated and amassed and provided to the powers that be as well. Totally independent, run by survivors as well.
Okay. Without putting words in your mouth, would I be right in saying that in doing this, you're attempting to not only put pressure on the system, but also work with it?
Yes, it's meant to work alongside the system. But it is actually, some people are too afraid, naturally, through their experiences, of being too involved with people who represent the state and authority. And we felt we could provide an alternative. and we've had lots of success with that so far, but it is now only 1 week left. So
Okay.
please come forward, give
Right,
us a try.
And Sam, what actually happens with the information that you have been collecting? Where does it go, and how do you expect it to be processed?
We have a lawyer in America who's been with us from the beginning, and she's unpaid. She takes the information over the phone in America, and it's anonymised, and then it's collected for the final report. We've got several other legal people, Payam Akavan, and we're going to collect the information to make an anonymised report, in the next few weeks.
Okay, and can I ask whether it's a personal, your personal feeling, or perhaps there's a sort of a view from the People's Tribunal, but what is your opinion on the Goddard inquiry?
I have to remain open-minded because we've come so far, with the revelations that we've had, top politicians, and it seems to be like a pack of cards that may eventually give way. And we can only hope that, it'll be impossible for any establishment to actually prevent that from happening. So we have to put our faith in what they're doing.
Right. Well, certainly for the UK column, something that we are now waiting to see what Justice Goddard does is on the question of what protection she will actually give abuse survivors. And we honed in on the Melanie Shaw case. That was because we were dealing with it at the time. But also, of course, Melanie Shaw has suffered unbelievable harassment at the hands of the institutions, and in particular Nottingham Police. So we've put this open letter to Ms Goddard saying, what are you actually going to do to protect people coming forward to talk about their abuse? And what we've had so far is the standard, thank you for your communication. We aim to reply within 15 working days. So we've got a couple of weeks before we expect to hear. And I've got to say, I'm being a little bit tough here, that it makes me cynical that when you talk about something which I think is very important, the protection of the whistleblowers, immense amount of courage to stand up and talk about this subject. And when they're coming forward, they need to be protected. But Ms Goddard's team at the moment seems to think that this can be done within 15 days. Perhaps I'm being a bit unkind. I don't know whether you'd like to comment on that or not.
Well, I've sent them an email. I haven't heard back. It's been over 50, it must be around 15 days now. So hopefully I'll hear something soon. We can only hope that the climate will change. I don't expect it to happen suddenly, and it's down to us really to make sure that the climate does change and make sure that we're included. I think Michael Mansfield is doing quite a lot to make sure that we're included, survivors are included in the legal process. And with that happening, I think there will be little chance of any really serious cover-ups and unprotected, witnesses.
Right. Okay. Well, I have to say that our view is that the establishment needs the carrot and stick treatment. So we can quite understand trying to work with some people within the public sector. Doing that is the carrot. The stick, of course, is everything that's being done at the moment to put pressure on the government and Theresa May herself in order to push this one through. But certainly we are hearing more and more that, I'm going to say, good policemen and women are now breaking ranks with their colleagues in order to talk about what's going on. There's a particular policeman in London who has been doing a huge amount to get the lid off what he sees as a blatant cover-up by the Metropolitan Police of child abuse. He's now being victimised, hounded out of his job. But he is also getting regular communications with support from colleagues who simply don't agree with what the bosses in the Met Police are doing. So I think this is very positive. Are you also, without any names, but are you also encountering people who are breaking ranks and whistleblowing from in the public sector themselves?
I have done. I've met quite a lot of them, and I think it's like anything. A climate change can happen where everything that was known before as the right way of doing things will suddenly reverse. The energy will switch, and it'll go the other way with any luck eventually. Right. And I do believe there'll be more people coming forward when they feel safer.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're looking to do some more work with you over the coming days, which is excellent. Just to give people a reminder, what was the deadline for reports into the People's Tribunal?
We've only actually got 5 more days, because it actually ends on the same day that the Jannah trial starts. So that's the deadline.
Okay.
We've got to get in before next Sunday.
All right, excellent. Okay, well, more on more on that in due course. We'll move on through some of the other topics on the news, and what better place to go than Lord Jannah? And we were really quite astonished to see a lengthy article in the Telegraph. Well, here it is, describing Lord Jannah as a helpless, senile man who should not be prosecuted. The CPS decision to prosecute Lord Jannah for child sex abuse means terrible allegations will now be levelled at a man who cannot defend himself. This is a very lengthy article. It addresses an abuse of procedure, that he's not going to face an ordinary trial. It's going to be a trial of the facts, and this poor man can't answer for himself. He's going to suffer a trial by Twitter storm, so people are just going to regard him as being a criminal. And the fact that even if there was something that went wrong in the early days in the public sector so that they didn't prosecute him originally, well, we shouldn't do something that's wrong now, because two wrongs don't make a right. We just felt that the Telegraph was going to great lengths to defend another suspect politician. And we'd also like to highlight that there's been no in-depth Telegraph investigation into the plight of other child abuse victims. So they've got an extremely lengthy article here, which is absolutely glowing in its praise and defence of Jannah. Well, who's written it? Well, it's this barrister, Matthew Scott, barristerblogger.com. I think he's from Pump House Chambers, if I remember correctly. And if you go to the blog, we've got this article on Ben Fellows, heavy on the Ben Fellows allegations, all fantasy. So Ben has been found not guilty of perverting the course of justice. Doesn't mean his allegations are true, but certainly if they were not considered true by the jury, they wouldn't have come back with that result. That's part of the implication. But in this article by Matthew Scott, he's absolutely hammering Ben Fellows. And then I couldn't help notice, but another one of his articles, it's the same thing. Anybody who is speaking out about satanic child abuse, that's also fantasy as well. So pretty strong language by this blogger barrister, and the Telegraph giving paragraph and paragraph to defending Jannah. Sam, if you've got a view on this one, I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I read this article, and he talks about baying crowds at the gates and it not being a proper sort of due process. And another person, I think Barbara Hewson, was writing an article saying that they were like Stalinistic trials, and really knocking the validity. So you get people, actually, this Twitter storm is and has been from people in the legal profession trying to bend the outcome of a legal process with their own opinions, rather than, us well-behaved survivors who've actually not been hysterical, as the word that's often used, and been, quite happy and level-headed that this process is taking place. This Twitter storm was him and his supporters, and they were quite vocal also in challenging anybody who disagreed with these articles.
Yeah.
I found it, quite intimidating, to be honest, a few weeks ago when this happened.
Well, you pick up on a very good point there. When I just had a little look at the chambers, of course, what they were boasting is that they've got barristers sitting as judges. So these people are running the law, and as you quite rightly say, they are now putting public opinion forward as to what their views are. So clearly, or it would appear, their own judges are certainly not independent. Something else is going on. But on the subject of what gets published, we remain very curious about Exaro. And of course, over the last couple of days, we've had this very interesting story, Exaro-led, that, it's emerged that there was a second claim of indecent assault against Ken Clark. But this was discussed with the judge on the lead up to Ben Fellowes' trial, and they decided that because the police investigation on this one was ongoing, it shouldn't be discussed in Ben Fellowes' trial. So, of course, the jury remained totally ignorant of the fact there was already a second claim of indecent assault. Now, we're going to say, in fact, since they didn't know, it must reinforce the decision of the jury with that not guilty verdict. But just fascinating that now we've got a second allegation. But what we're very puzzled about, I'll just say as a UK column view, is that, of course, it was Exaro's David Henke who boasted that he'd helped the Met Police prove that the Ben Fellowes allegation was false. And yet Exaro made no full report of the Fellowes court hearing. So we didn't see a day-by-day report when all sorts of interesting information was coming out. And it's taken an amateur news report, IFN News, to actually have a look at what was happening in that hearing on a day-by-day basis. We're going to have a little look into what they were talking about in due course. Can't do that today. But here we are. We've now got a second abuse allegation against Ken Clarke. But Exaro will not get involved in any of the larger cases that we and many other people have been reporting. They won't deal with Melanie Shaw and Beechwood. They won't deal with Mickey Summers in Nottingham. They won't deal with Bill Maloney. They won't deal with Holly Gregg. So this specialist news organisation says that basically they are there reporting on child abuse, but they seem to be very selective. Now, you might think I'm being a bit tough on this one, Sam. How do you see it?
I think they have a fine balance and a fine line to walk. They really want to make sure their relationship with the police and the powers that be is perhaps, a workable relationship. So perhaps they're just testing the water and being a bit too cautious with these things. I don't know about David Henke's personal opinion. I think there was one reason why he felt that this trial was not didn't have the right amount of evidence, and Ben Fellowes, they didn't back him. But I think that they're walking a difficult line, and I hope that they'll get bolder and prove everyone's doubts wrong.
Okay, well, we'll see what actually happens with that. Now, Mike, you've picked up on a couple of things. Mr. Corbyn's coming into the spotlight and into the heat, in fact, isn't he, over allegations of child abuse?
Well, we should just say that the allegations of child abuse aren't against him, but he does seem to have some pretty significant questions to answer here, because, of course, he was Member of Parliament in Islington, and that a hotbed of abuse. But this article accuses him of turning a blind eye to the child abuse that went on over the years. This is information that's coming from some social workers that were working in Islington at the time, and they're quoted as saying, "We had been seeing so many 12 to 15-year-olds who were being sexually exploited, we could hardly believe it." And that was Liz Davies, one of the social workers. So Corbyn apparently did nothing. They said that any time they went to him with issues, he was very polite to them. He said he would do something, and he did nothing. But in the middle of this article, there is an interesting little quote here, and it's from John Mann. And John Mann says, "Your inaction," and he's talking about Corbyn. He says, "Your inaction in the 1980s and 1990s says a lot, not about your personal character, which I admire, but about your politics, which I do not." I have to say, I actually see it quite the opposite way to John Mann here, because this really is about Jeremy Corbyn's personal character, not about his politics, because this is about whether he's prepared to stand up for people that have been victimised in this way. So I think the politics could be set aside here. He was in a position where he could have done a lot to help. And they went on to suggest that he actually complained when Geoffrey Dickens turned up in Islington to raise the issue of the child abuse in that constituency. So then later on in the article, it goes on to say, in the meantime, the scandal left MP Jeremy Corbyn in a very tricky position indeed. A self-confessed Marxist who, before entering Parliament, had been a full-time organiser for the National Union of Public Employees, which represented town hall staff. He would not just upset such political allies as Hodge, Hewitt, Dromey and Harman by speaking out. He might also offend and compromise comrades in the trade union movement. And of course, this is an interesting point because he stayed silent, but he was really existing within a nest of vipers. And I'm not attempting to apologise for it at all, but we've got to understand the situation he was in. So, you know, he has been singled out here, but which of the other three leadership candidates are speaking out on this subject? Is the child sexual abuse scandal a major leadership subject? No, it isn't. So why not? Do any of the other leadership candidates have a better track record than Corbyn? No, they don't. So we're singling out an individual here. I suspect there's a particular reason for that. We should also note that, of course, Chris Leslie, who is gunning for Corbyn and hopes to retain his position as Shadow Chancellor under a different leader, is not only saying nothing on the issue, but of course he's also complicit through his inaction on the continuing abuse of Melanie Shaw. So I think we need to keep in mind that, about 648 of the 650 MPs from all constituencies and all political parties have been silent on this issue over the years, not just Jeremy Corbyn, and that doesn't excuse what he did, what he didn't do in any way. I'm just really pointing out that this is not just a Jeremy Corbyn issue. So, you know, at the end of the day, each of us should be not only demanding of our local representatives that they deal with this issue, that they speak out in this issue, but if they are prepared to do that, we should be willing to give them our support. But in the meantime, we've got to remember that virtually none of the MPs in Parliament are actually doing anything on this issue. Not just Corbyn; they've all got questions to answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? The sudden focus on this man, and as you say, Mike, there are so many other people, and we've seen the empty seats in Westminster when there's been debates over the child abuse subject. 12, 15 people in the House, and the rest of them simply not interested. And then when the 10% pay rise was on the cards, they're full of it. But we've got something else going on in Rotherham that. Bernardo's has suddenly got a lot of money, presumably from the government, to tackle child abuse. Am I going to be really cynical here and say, but isn't it Bernardo's that's supposed to have been stopping child abuse for the last 50 years?
Well, indeed they are. This is being funded by the government. It's also being funded by Rotherham Council and what's being described as independent backers. And this is to fund 15 specialists to help victims and those at risk of child sexual exploitation. So I'd just like to remind everybody, if we just go to the next one, Brian, please, of the Rotherham Common Purpose Effect article. And in fact, all the Common Purpose Effect articles, if you go into the sections menu and go to series, there's a series of Common Purpose Effect articles. If you read all those, because who will these 15 specialists be, and will any of them be common purpose graduates? The abuse in Rotherham and the cover-up we are alleging is as a result of the common purpose networks protecting each other in their incompetence. And the question is, can the involvement of common purpose graduates, well, this is the question we asked in this article, actually. Can the involvement of common purpose graduates in the Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust case, the Leveson inquiry, and their presence in the network's strategic partnerships, which failed to protect vulnerable children in Rotherham, be simply explained as coincidence? And we believe that it's not. So I think we're going to say to Bernardo's today that we're watching who is chosen for this, who these specialists are, and we'll be watching to see if they are there to in fact continue the cover-up of what happened there. But hopefully they're not.
Yeah. Well, certainly something that concerns me with this putting forward of specialists is, and the focus is on child abuse survivors. It's on the victims. Many people would say quite right too. But of course, north of the border, we've got an increasingly draconian system where we're putting named persons alongside children from conception in order to protect them from child abuse. And this is now being widely contested north of the border as the state simply taking control of people's children. Sam, this is a very difficult subject sometimes to see what's really happening. Would you have confidence in Barnardo's leading a specialist team to sort Rotherham out?
I've heard varying reports about Barnardo's from different people. I don't know enough about them personally, but if you're talking about common purpose being involved, I mean, any group that's designed to, share power is going to smooth things over and just manage them the way the system's always done. And we need somebody new, something new, I would imagine, to come in this situation.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll watch that one closely. Probably, though, we're not going to get too much joy out of the BBC, very shy at reporting problems inside the BBC, and particularly what did go on around Jimmy Savile. But Mike, it looks as though there's some more dirty dealing going on, or possibly.
I can't work out whether that's actually what is going on or whether this is just a placed story, because the BBC obviously very concerned about the cuts that they're likely to face and the changes over the licence fee, and whether this is actually a real story or not. But this is Chris Bryant demanding to see a list of meetings and phone calls between George Osborne and Murdoch himself. So they're alleging, Bryant is alleging that there's some kind of insider dealing going on between the Tory government and Murdoch, with a view to seeing the BBC cut down to size, and they're suggesting that there's lobbying going on because Murdoch would like to see the BBC cut down to size because they consider them a competitor. So we'll keep an eye on this story. Don't know exactly yet what's behind it, but we will keep watching.
Okay. Something else that was sent through to us about the BBC was the fact that the BBC seemed to be giving glowing praise to the rise of Satanism. And this BBC story, which goes on and on, paragraph after paragraph, is about the erecting of a Baphomet statue in America with all the ceremony. This was covered in other parts of the press last week, but the BBC now on the bandwagon. But if you read this BBC article, they are simply promoting it. They discuss the name Baphomet, and interestingly enough, they put in a little twist here where they say, well, it could come from the Prophet Muhammad. I think this is deliberate BBC stirring here. They then introduce a little bit of fantasy land and say, oh, well, it's really only connected with the Da Vinci Code. And of course, that's only a film and a thriller, a book. So this is nothing too serious. But then on it goes. So they have a look at Levi's Baphomet. They discuss the two young children, the caducus or caduceus, if that's the right thing. That is the twisted snakes, which you can see on Baphomet's stomach there. In fact, I think I'm right in saying it should be a phallus, but that's presumably been taken out of this particular statue. They discuss the fact that Baphomet should really have breasts as having attributes of male and female. They talk about the pentagram, the inscriptions, and then they discuss the Satanic Temple. So we're saying it's quite remarkable that the BBC is once again openly promoting Satanism, but putting in that barb that, well, it's linked to the Prophet Muhammad. And I can certainly understand if Muslims in this country getting upset with the BBC once again. We've seen it with child abuse, where the BBC went visiting mosques to ask Asians what they thought of paedophile investigations. BBC certainly didn't go near Christian churches or any other places of worship, only for the Muslim community. And then, of course, it was the BBC back in 2004 that wrote the glowing story that the Navy had approved Satanism for use on board warships. to which we'd like to say, who exactly was the government minister that made this decision and what did he base it on? But it seems to us quite remarkable that while we've got barristers, as we showed earlier in the programme, who are busily saying, oh, well, there is nothing in this, satanic abuse, complete nonsense, all fantasy. And then what do we see? The BBC actively promoting it. Sometimes it's difficult actually to go through this stuff on the news and explain exactly what's happening. I think the BBC is promoting it. Sam, I'll give you an opportunity here. Is this fantasy, or do you think there's something darker?
I think they want to blur the moral boundaries in society, don't they? They've got more control then, and make us just a mass of people who don't really think too deeply and confuse issues and don't get too upset by the issues like child abuse and things that are in front of us. So if they blur our reactions to things, confuse them, then they have more power to dictate, what we think. And I think it's the same in somehow with the child abuse agenda. It kind of brings society down to a level, maybe that the state would find easier to control in its chaos and in its, loss of purpose.
Well, that is a remarkable comment, and that is, we often say that we don't plan the news, and certainly we didn't plan the news with you, but a little bit later we're going to come on to that very subject. Well, BBC, let's stay with them. Somebody sent us a very good email pointing out and discussing the BBC's report on the recent trial of Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. And I'll read this out because some very good points. It says, "Hi Brian, just another example of BBC spin in their reporting of overseas matters earlier this week. They reported on the trial of Gaddafi's son in Tripoli. And who did they trot out to deliver the report to camera? None other than John Simpson, who proceeded to claim how unpopular Saif al-Islam was in his own country, together with many other lies, which is a continuation of the original condemnation of Gaddafi delivered by the self-same John Simpson just before Gaddafi was murdered." And they go on to talk about how he did that interview, but point out that the BBC has never ever reported on all the good things that Gaddafi did for Libyan citizens. He introduced free healthcare, free education, financial grants for newlyweds and anybody who wanted to start a farm in the hinterland, and he was also doing big water projects. BBC doesn't cover any of that at all. And who is the man who's been doing all of this? Well, here he is, BBC, more boasting of its own performance, and a rather ghoulish, is the best I can describe it, report on inside the courtroom after the death penalty verdict. But the other thing that our viewer picked up was a report to do with Goldman Sachs losing 98% of money placed with them by Gaddafi. And if we go to this one here, Forbes have got quite a major article on it. Goldman Sachs lost 98% of Libya's 1.3 billion sovereign wealth fund investment. And in the article, they say that recent information derived from interviews with close to a dozen people who were involved in the matter and on the Libyan Investment Authority and the Goldman documents themselves show that they lost this 1.3 billion investment in options contracts on a basket of currencies and 6 stocks. So there we are. Not a lot of reporting on that side by the BBC, but of course when it's necessary to hammer Libya, a country taken from civilization to absolute mayhem at the moment, the BBC simply doesn't want to cover that. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to say, any investment firm, hedge fund, investment bank does not lose 98% of its customers' assets under management by accident. That doesn't happen.
So your inference there would be it's been lost by design, which presumably means it's in somebody's pocket, but maybe I'm having a particularly cynical Monday.
Possibly.
Okay. Well, Sam mentions there chaos in the country and the fact that everything is being blurred so that we really don't know what's going on. What better place to start than the Behavioural Insights team? And this was brought to our attention this morning. New blog post from the Insight team, Simon Ruder, promoting diversity in the police. Now, this was of great interest to us because we've been getting a lot of reports about just appalling performance by the police. Sarah Thornton, at the moment, the boss of the police police chiefs committee, has said, well, there's not enough money to investigate routine crimes like burglaries, for example. So she's reimagining policing, and how interesting that we've also got the Behavioural Insights team involved. So this is part of their report, and they're crowing at their own performance getting inside of the police. And what they've been showing is that due to their efforts of gently moulding the way people think, on the right-hand side of the screen, they're showing a huge jump in black and minority ethnic groups being accepted into the police. It's jumped from 40.6% in the black column to the right of your screen up to 61.6%. Now, we are looking here at the organisation and what it's doing. We're not commenting on the issue of black and minority ethnic groups. We're looking on what this organisation is doing. So we are just noticing that as overall police performance plummets, they can't get police out for proper crime, but they can get huge forces out, for example, in Nottingham over repossessions. So police performance plummets, Behavioural Insight team input rises, along with this. So we haven't got any money for proper policing, but we've now got police vehicles being pretty resprayed, which must be a pretty expensive process. These were taken from blogs. We've got a police motorbike here as well. And there's even comment from one gay police officer who says, I'm as shocked as anybody else at this use of police money. So is common sense out the window in the police? Well, many think it is. What is the reason for that? We are going to suggest it's the Behavioural Insights team. And if you get into their website and have a look, you can start to see that they're doing some pretty amazing stuff. They're saying here, we're excited to have started large programmes of work with 2 police forces, West Midlands and Avon and Somerset Constabulary, and they're going to be doing more over the next 18 months. They're going to be trialling police morale, police efficiency, demand management, online exploitation of adults and children, and reoffending. But beyond policing, we're now working on a range of home affairs issues like illegal immigration, illicit working, smoothing passport demand, and reducing witness attrition prior to trial. Now, our attention was drawn by this gentleman down at the bottom. Here he is, Simon Ruder, Principal Advisor, Head of Home Affairs, Security and International Development. So this man appears to be some sort of guru. He can operate in all manner of departments. And what is he going to be doing? Well, he's going to be reframing the way we think and behave. Well, what does he look like? Well, here he is. And if we get into the text, it gets even more interesting because who's he been working for? He's been working for central government in UK and overseas. He's worked with the World Bank, United Nations, British Army, Metropolitan Police Service, and he's involved in everything. He's involved in home affairs, security, international development. So who is this man really, and why should we trust him, and why should we trust his values? Well, if we've got you thinking, you might like to just focus on the rest of the Behavioural Insights team. Here's the photo call of the whole team, and we say, were any of these people elected? Are they accountable to the general public? Well, the answer at the moment is no. And if you read their recent report, who have we got writing the foreword Well, it's none other than Oliver Letwin, the man that many people say is simply controlling the government single-handed. And of course, we remind ourselves this is the man who threw away classified documents in a London park.
I just wanted to make a point before you move on, Brian, because it's reasonable that the police should have a better range of people working for them. I don't see much diversity in that group of photographs there. So what are they doing going into other organisations and preaching the diversity message?
Well, this is the key question, and who these people are. I've got to say, many of them are very young, and so you might lightly say, what is their professional experience? What's their life experience? But exactly who are these people, and why should we trust them? Why should we trust them with putting their views onto us? Well, if we stick with Simon Ruder, we just went looking for him, and we come up with this. Bit more on him, telling us, of course, about the United Nations. It says he was working on their development program and the World Bank. Presumably the two go hand in glove. But here he is with the Kapuscinski lectures, and we say, what is all that about? So please go and check this yourself. But here is the man himself. And if we look into his background, he comes out of Eastern Europe. He then starts to show an interest in what took place in the Stalinist era. He's looking at third world countries. This is an absolute political animal talking about reframing the world on a big scale. And this appears to be some of the doctrine, at least, that's being fed back into British society through the Behavioural Insights team. I've thrown quite a lot in there. Sam, I don't know whether you've come across this outfit before, but have you encountered the Behavioural Insights team?
That it sounds like, and it's quite frightening, isn't it? Because you get a doctrine that's running, something as powerful as the police, and it's a bit like a rule: you can't tread on the cracks on the pavement. If everyone wasn't allowed to tread on them, that would change the whole of the world. It would change life dramatically. And when they have these doctrines, does that mean everybody's disciplined and afraid of stepping over their lines, or how are they controlling these people? What kind of a restriction of freedom and free thought is it going to actually have with this kind of, process? I think these people need to think for themselves, don't they? These police.
Indeed, and I think this is what we're now starting to see happen, is that they can't think for themselves because what comes into their mind is what the doctrinal answer is the whole time. So I believe that this is one of the most dangerous topics that we're facing at the moment in this country. I mean, just take Oliver Letwin. Why would you trust Oliver Letwin to change any of your views and values? He's part of an absolutely rotten Conservative government. Prime Minister David Cameron on record saying we shouldn't trouble ourselves over child abuse, particularly in Westminster. It's all in the past. Don't worry your little heads. We've got criminality, we've got perverts, and these are the people who are now saying that they're going to reframe the way we think. I think it needs to be the other way around pretty quickly. Well, we've got a couple of examples here of what's going on, because isn't it interesting that as child abuse, particularly in Westminster, is becoming more and more prevalent in the press and media, so alternate subjects come in. So we've suddenly got a flurry of articles now talking about immigration. Of course, problems at Calais are part of this. But we've got an Express headline here: border checks left unstaffed for high-risk passengers in mockery of UK airport control. And Conservative MP Philip Davis says this is completely unacceptable and makes our border controls a mockery. Well, I was fascinated by this terminology because if we go back to who was controlling the borders, we had the failed chief executive from Birmingham City Council, Lynn Homer, specially selected as a common purpose graduate, future leader of society and indeed the world. And she was promoted out of her failed job in Birmingham City to become chief executive of the UK Border Agency. And the the Chief Inspector's report at that time, we're going back a few years now, he said that basically it was a shambles. What did they do with her? They then promoted her to transport, they then promoted her to revenue and customs. So we've got common purpose chaos by design, and you know this is what it is because these people get promoted after they've done the damage. But let's have a look, remembering Philip Davis' comment there, this is completely unacceptable and makes our borders control a mockery. Have a look at this comment by Tories. They're boasting about destroying Britain. So Nicholas Bowles MP, quoted in The Guardian, the Prime Minister and his deputy Nick Clegg want their people power revolution to unleash chaotic effects across local communities. Chaotic, therefore, in our conservative vocabulary, is a good thing. And if you don't believe him, have a look at Danny Kruger, Cameron ally and one-time advisor. He had to resign after he blew the whistle. The Conservatives plan to introduce a period of creative destruction in the public services. So apparently Philip Davis doesn't know what the agenda of the Conservative government is, but we seem to be living chaos now. Well, we shouldn't be surprised because these people said they were going to introduce it. Sam, I'll give you the last word on that.
Well, it seems to be creative destruction, doesn't it? I mean, Barbara Hewson, I think it was talking about Stalinistic courts, but I mean, what we've been looking at is Stalinistic style rapes in Britain. I mean, you only do that when you're, it's like a sign of civil war, really, isn't it? It's an act of war, basically, allowing these things to continue on such a large scale against a population. You do it to demoralise, you do it to bring a community down, basically.
Yeah.
So I've seen it happening.
Okay. Well, Sam, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us. Yes, okay. So I've just been reminded. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to meeting you in person and having an in-depth look at what's going on. But I believe you've also got a book that you've published recently, which is absolutely on the button.
It's An Oath to Hell. It's about the institutions, my experience of them while trying to seek justice over the past 25 years, really, and more, how they want to sweep things under the carpet and how they manage, the situation. This is my experience of it. An Oath to Hell.
And how do people get hold of a copy of your book?
It's on Amazon. It's been available for 6 years now, so it's a bit ahead of its time. Right,
okay. Right, thank you very much for that. Thank you for joining us, Sam. Well, I'd just like to say that quite a few people reminding us of what has been going around Chris Spivey. Chris Spivey's website taken down, and of course at the moment the plan is for a trial where he's not allowed to know who's making the allegations against him. So Sam there talking about Stalinist trial, Stalinist Britain, absolutely spot on. And the other thing that we would like to warn people about, alert people to, is the action being taken by Plymouth City Council against Our Place, Our Base, OPOB. This has been a amateur news website which has been running over several years, putting out very good information. Plymouth City Council has decided that their information getting just a little bit too accurate on the subject of abuse inside the system, and so Plymouth City Council has at the moment shut that site down, but there is to be an appeal and a hearing will be run in Plymouth on Friday. We'll give you more details of that. But of course, the implication if Plymouth City Council gets away with this is that any alternative news or media outlet can be shut down by a local authority that wants to hide its secrets, or as Sam would say, sweep it under the carpet. So OPOB, if you Google it, you will find information on the website. We will also be posting on this. Mike?
Just a reminder before we go, or well, just to let people know before we go, that there's no Crane Report Fracking Nightmare tonight. That will be tomorrow night. So Crane Report and Fracking Nightmare at the usual times tomorrow evening.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of today's news. Thank you for joining us. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing or making a donation. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.